Wish I would have known. Hi, and thank you for joining the Wish I Would Have Known podcast, or as we like to call it, WIWHK. I'm your host, Troy Vera. I'm inspired by the variety of surprise twists and turns that people have taken in their careers, and will continue inviting them to share their stories with you. Our guests represent diverse lines of business. You'll meet social workers, symphony musicians, racehorse owners, radio personalities, human resources leaders, commercial real estate lenders, filmmakers, and school principals, just to name a few. Join us and hear what has worked for them and what might just spark a fire in you. This podcast, as always, is going to be a conversation between friends and peers, nothing too crazy or fancy. We'll be sharing life's experiences in the interest of helping you grow and succeed in your current or even a new career field. Today's guest is Callie Siverson Oberheu, and she's telling us about her career journey as a symphony musician. So let's get to know Callie a little bit better. Hi, Callie.
Hi, Troy. It's great to be here.
Thanks. Appreciate your time today. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I grew up in a small town in Central California. I was the child of two musicians, and listening to them play together in their different groups really inspired me. So after I graduated high school, I decided to go to music school. At the time, I was really inspired by film music. I loved the film music that was popular when I was growing up. Scores like John Williams for Jurassic Park and Star Wars and Indiana Jones, things like that. So I decided to go to school in Los Angeles, hoping to get a career in the film industry. While I was there, I discovered the classical and romantic composers who had inspired all of those film composers, and that really got me hooked on orchestral music. So I continued on in grad school and started taking auditions. My goal was to take orchestral auditions until I turned 30, and if it didn't work out by then, I would look for a career doing something else. I was very fortunate to win the second audition I ever took at age 22, and that was with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra in Manitoba, Canada. I've been there ever since.
Wow, that's amazing, going from our little town of Central Valley to all the way up to the Great White North. What took you up to Canada? Was it the opportunity with the symphony, or was it just sort of another life direction?
It was totally random. We have a union magazine that advertises all of the orchestra positions that are open within North America, and when I was leafing through that magazine, there was a spot open in Winnipeg. At the time, I didn't even really know where Winnipeg was. I think it was listed in the old spaghetti factory in San Jose. They had a list of all the places where there was an old spaghetti factory, and there was an old spaghetti factory in Winnipeg. That was probably the only time in my life I'd ever heard of that place. So I got a plane ticket. I went up, and I was one of, I think it was about 15 people applying for the position. And we did round after round after round until I was the last person standing. Yeah, it was really exciting. And after that, I had a 2.5-year tenure process where a panel of my colleagues and the orchestra conductor would vote on whether or not they wanted to extend my contract. And I passed that first round of votes and then the second round, and was offered a permanent contract in the orchestra.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I mean, the great thing too is that even if it didn't pan out, you can at least go up there and get some fettuccine primavera with the garlic butter on the bread there at Old Spaghetti Factory, and swing your way back home and keep on going. So when you started getting in with WSO, who was an important role model in your early time there?
When I joined the WSO, I was one of 5 players. 2 of the players were relatively new, and the other 2 had been there for decades and decades. The 4th horn player in particular was the fellow I sat by, and he had really seen it all. There wasn't a lot that could faze him, and when I would get my pre-performance jitters, sitting next to him and seeing how calm he was really helpful and inspiring for me. Also, getting to know him personally was interesting. In addition to horn playing, he had a really wide variety of interests. He was a gamer and a music composer. He built his own cottage at the lake from scratch and made it like an off-grid oasis. He did kung fu. And at the time, I was kind of surprised that a musician could find so much time in their life to do all these various things. I thought, well, gosh, you have to spend so much time in the practice room. How would you ever be able to get all these other interests? But as I've matured in my career, I've sort of seen how having a variety of interests can actually make you a better musician and creator and artist.
I also know that, your father was really diverse in his interests, and your mother too, but being a young man raised just down the block from your family, I got to see your dad doing a whole variety of things. literature, and he even taught me some skateboard tricks. I mean,
Yeah, right.
and working on his old powder blue VW station wagon. He was one of those people that if he didn't know how to do it, he'd probably figure it out. And if he couldn't figure it out, he'd find somebody and then work with them to make it work. So I think having that enterprising spirit in you already made you a little bit more open to somebody like this expert that you ended up just sort of sitting next to and befriending. And it was familiar territory. You probably felt like, this guy could probably be friends with my dad.
Oh, yeah, totally. In fact, my dad has bought a couple of horns from him over the years. They have become friends for sure. You're talking about starting out with that spirit of creativity. Mm-hmm. That is often taken away, or you lose that when you're in your education and trying to market yourself as an orchestral musician. They tend to emphasize hours and hours spent in the practice room, repetition of your audition material, so much so that it's impossible for you to make a mistake. Mm-hmm. So instead of cultivating your creativity, you're almost trying to become a robotic perfectionist because it's that quality that will allow you to win an audition. Then once you've gotten the audition, you have to switch gears a little bit and start to cultivate your creativity again. And that was difficult for me when I started working. That 2.5-year period of being a temporary hire is awfully scary, and you want to do everything you can to make sure that you are perfect in every way so that they have no reason not to hire you on with a permanent contract.
It seems kind of like a little bit of a pressure cooker. And as a visual creative myself, it almost feels like somebody just standing over my shoulder and watching me create. And that's when you make those silly mistakes. I was going to ask you, compared to, let's say, the American ethos and the Canadian style, is there any kind of significant difference in, let's say, the work-life balance or showing up on time to work? Or is there a difference in how Americans and Canadians approach something like creativity?
That's a great question. One big difference between American culture and Canadian culture that I've noticed is that Canadians are very concerned with politeness, and sometimes that can get in the way of pragmatism. I find it very refreshing when colleagues are able to communicate genuinely and not be afraid to say exactly what they mean. In the orchestra, we have a really strict hierarchy. So the conductor gives direction to the orchestra, and in each section there's one section leader who gives direction to the section, and you don't skip any steps in that hierarchy when you're putting the music together. So I feel very lucky because 2 of the 5 horn players are dual citizens and one is an American permanent resident. So we have a little bit of a microcosm of US culture within the Canadian culture in our section. And I feel like that really helps us communicate with each other and develop what we're going to do as a section.
Well, that's so great. What class, training, or some kind of course as you were coming up did you undervalue that you wish you would have taken a little bit more seriously?
So back in college, one of the courses I had to take that I felt at the time was a real waste was called Movement Training for Musicians. It seemed ridiculous that we would be in a room talking about different dance movements and how to use our bodies in a way that I didn't feel was relevant at all to playing the French horn at a very high level, which was what I was at school to achieve. Now that I've been working full time for so long, I have seen the repetitive strain injury issues that come up again and again, not just for musicians, but for the dancers and the singers that we work with in some of our other ensembles. It turns out that having a good sense of your body and the way your body moves in space is extremely important to a musician. The way that you move when you're playing can either help or hinder the message you're trying to send through the music you're making. In terms of being able to communicate and use your creativity, movement is incredibly important. It's become one of my biggest interests in this later stage of my career.
Yeah, I imagine sitting down and standing up, even just the flow of air and the way your physiology works probably has a huge impact. But then if you're tense up top, do you have to do like massages and stuff like that to kind of make sure that you stay limber and healthy so the way you're not going to turn into a human chair yourself?
Oh, absolutely. All of the musicians in my organization take full advantage of the services that are covered under our contract, which includes massage and physio and acupuncture and various things. But more so than any specific therapeutic treatment, what I think is incredibly important is cross-training. So if your shoulder moves a certain way for all those hours when you're in the practice room, in your day-to-day life, you should find other ways to move your shoulder so that it does something different, so that you're not just doubling down on that physical motion again and again when you don't need to. The same supporting your instrument, you can do a little bit of a twist in your torso. And in your day-to-day life, when you're sitting on the couch watching TV or checking your phone or cooking dinner, maybe you don't need to be doing that twist. Maybe you could even see what it's like to twist the other way. You want to make sure that you're using all of the possible movements available to your body so you don't get muscle bound into this one position, which, over the course of years and years, you were saying about turning into a chair. I think of it as turning into a caricature of a musician where your head is too far forward and your shoulders are too hunched. And eventually this isn't going to help you play your instrument. It's going to hinder you. So I really think hard about what can I do to cross-train? What can I do to move my body differently from what I'm doing when I'm at work?
So it sounds to me like that's kind of a common mistake that people usually make that probably would lead to frustration or maybe even a lack of performance because they don't tune their bodies as well as they tune their instruments.
Yeah, that's a really great way of describing it. I think as a student, first you train your ear and you get an idea of the sound you want, the sound of the music you're playing, the timbre of your instrument, and you make that your highest priority because that is your product, is the sound that comes out of your instrument. And when you're a young player, you might do anything you can physically to make that beautiful sound. And some of the things you try are probably going to serve you well in the long term, and some of the things you try might end up giving you terrible back pain later, or even getting in the way of being able to produce that great sound after a few decades of doing the same thing over and over. As a college professor, I try to get in there as my students are learning and help them develop a sense of body awareness that they can take with them on their journey of development as a player so that maybe they can avoid some of the pitfalls that people tend to fall into.
It's really good because it goes beyond just playing the music. If they're parents and they have a back problem because they're holding their instrument the wrong way over the years, they might not be able to carry their kids or do sports or activities because they're just so kind of out of whack. What method do you use that's not really a norm, but it works for you? What's something that no matter what you insist on doing?
Well, when I started as a professional musician, I thought that I needed to practice every piece of music the same way I practiced my audition material, which was to repeat it over and over again so often that I would be able to play it perfectly no matter what. And that works when you're practicing audition material because your whole audition booklet put together is only maybe 45 minutes to an hour's worth of music. But when you're in a full-time orchestra position and you're learning maybe 3 2-hour programs in a week, you really don't have the physical capability to practice that much music, that many repetitions. So as I've aged as a musician, one of the things that I tend to do is to prepare as much as I can without physically using the instrument at all. I go on YouTube or I look through my library of recordings and find a recording that really inspires me, and I listen to it as I read through the music, reading along with the recording. I pantomime the fingering changes that I would be using on the horn, but I don't hold the horn. I'm just kind of lying comfortably on the couch doing that preparation. I notice, even without playing, the spots where I might have some kind of brain freeze or a fingering mistake, and then I'll pause my recording. I'll put in visual cues to make sure that I don't make that mistake, and then continue listening and preparing. So about 3/4 of my practice time now is done in imaginary preparation and in writing in these visual cues, so that when I do get the instrument up and ready to go, I don't have to spend a lot of time practicing. I can just run through the things that I have already flagged as being important. And for the most part, that allows me to prepare as much as I did as a younger player with all the repetition. It's a lot more pragmatic. It saves me time and it helps me prepare in an efficient way.
And it just kind of gives you some organization so you don't have to think of every single note. You talk about the peaks, you make the notes, and then you just play in between those peaks. And it'll probably all just feels very natural. Having heard it, maybe having played a little bit, or even just with, like you said, your imaginary play as you're in a completely new situation, lying on the sofa, I would imagine psychologically your brain works a little differently. If you're in a chair, okay, I'm present, I'm here. But sometimes when I used to get sort of design block, I would lay on my bed with my head hanging off the bed and just look out the window upside down, taking myself out of whatever situation I was in, just disrupt it. Then I can really think something through. It might be just a little spark, or it might be the whole darn thing, and all of a sudden, boom, here's my breakthrough, because I got out of that comfort zone, that normal thing. And that's really important to shake things up. If somebody gets to know you, plays in the symphony, socializes, whatever that might be, what's your work language? What are the things that mean the most to you, and how can somebody forge that relationship with you?
So 2 words that mean a lot to me as a musician. The first one relates to my role within the organization, and that word is play. So when someone asks me what I do for a living, I don't tell them I work for the symphony orchestra. I say, I play in the orchestra. I play horn. Like, play is the verb that I use to describe what my job is. And we can really easily get bogged down with regular job stress, different things that come up in the course of a week, and having to go in and dealing with traffic and parking and being uninspired by repertoire sometimes, or not enjoying where you're sitting on the stage. All kinds of different things can really bog us down and get us feeling discouraged. But the more we can cultivate that state of play when we are performing, even the most uninspiring music can become exciting, and even the most frustrating circumstances that you might be dealing with outside of your time on the stage can kind of melt away, and you can really have a wonderful, joyous experience. So I would counsel all musicians to be very mindful and cultivate that state of play when they're performing. The other word that's really important to me, and this is more about the orchestra as an organization, is community. We're all individuals and we are working together to create this great music, but it doesn't happen in a vacuum. And if we don't cultivate our own community and become vibrant members of the community where our orchestra is operating, we won't be able to continue as an organization. As I've lived in Winnipeg now just over 20 years, and I've become more involved in organizations outside of the orchestra, advocacy groups, and different philanthropic organizations, even just walking back and forth from work instead of driving and interacting with the people in the neighborhoods between the concert hall and my house, I feel like I'm more a part of the community. And when I cultivate relationships with regular Winnipeggers out in the world, that's one more musician that they know. That might inspire them to come and buy a ticket and catch one of our concerts, or even one of the free concerts we offer in the summertime. And I really want to cultivate that sense of community, both as an individual member of the orchestra and encourage my organization to do that as well.
Because then you can also transition into maybe the place of a role model. You see somebody at the coffee shop or the pizza place all the time, and their child is a creative and maybe wants to get into the field of music. They can just maybe introduce them or even point to you and say, you know what, she plays in the symphony. If you work really hard and you study, you could do that too. And you just be that example, even from a distance, but being a part of where you live is valid and super important role. So how close do you live to the symphony hall?
I'm fairly close. I live in the West End, which is adjacent to downtown. Okay. So it takes me a little bit over an hour to walk to the concert hall. Of course, I can only do that in the warmer months. So Winnipeg is a small enough city that you can get to any part of it from the center in 45 minutes or less, generally, without traffic. So it's a neat and maybe unique city in Canada because in many ways it has the feel of a small town, but it's a large enough metropolitan area that any sort of opportunity or group or hobby you might have, you're going to find other people that are interested in the same thing. So it's very cool being a part of that. After growing up in a small town, I can't give my kids that similar small town experience, but this is like as close as we're going to get to it. And they really do enjoy it here.
So talking just a moment ago about hobbies, tell me about some of the hobbies or the ways that put the instrument down, unplug from stuff, and just be yourself.
Okay, so when I came to Winnipeg, I had never experienced winter before. I had probably only seen it snow maybe 1 or 2 times. But to give an American an idea of where we're located, Winnipeg is about 3.5 hours north of Fargo, North Dakota. So it's really, really cold, very snowy. And when I got here, I had no idea what I was going to do in all those winter months. Would I just, sit in the living room and watch Netflix or what? I feel really fortunate that I became friends with a few local folks in the orchestra who said, oh, when we were kids, Dad used to take us out cross-country skiing and we'd stop in a little hut and cook some hot dogs over the open fire. So they were full of ideas of things I could do. And I just learned how to do those things. So any time I can get outside and away from the concert hall, which of course is a very large, windowless, soundproofed room, it's a great way for me to ground myself and remember who I am as a citizen of the world and who am I besides just being a musician. So I've been able to go cross-country skiing in the winter and canoeing in the summer, and walking and hiking are other things that I try to do year-round when that's possible. And being in nature can be so inspiring, and it really does have an effect on being creative once I bring those experiences back into the practice room and back into the concert hall.
I was going to say, I bet you probably experienced this sort of rhythm of nature, birds, insects, water, even just the wind, these things that inspired the masters of the craft, the Mahlers and the Strauss and all these people who just like back then were inspired enough and wrote these things by candlelight. But even the modern masters like John Williams and people like James Horner and Jerry Goldsmith that brought the sounds of real life into their compositions. We had the amazing opportunity to watch live with the Austin Symphony a Jerry Goldsmith retrospective concert.
Oh, great.
Earlier this year. Some of the stuff that he brought in was just so amazing, just like horns and squealing springs, and in the context of either a chaotic moment in a movie or conveying busyness or tenderness or whatever. It totally made sense because our ears are already hearing those things. So it's more of an immersive opportunity to get into that score, into that moment, and be right there. I'm sure you, as a seasoned musician, probably bring some of that flow into how you still interpret the written music, but it's how you put your stamp on it.
Oh, yeah. I think that music is about storytelling. And what's neat about being in an orchestra is that we're all individually communicating something, but then as a whole, we're allowing the audience to experience something bigger than themselves, bigger than ourselves even. And it can be a really, really powerful experience.
And counterbalancing that, and sometimes you're going to feel the pressure, the challenge, and maybe even a kick in the shin every once in a while. Was there a time when you got some bad advice or some sort of slight from either a coworker or another musician that just put you in the mindset of, you know what, I'm going to prove you wrong?
Oh, yeah. Music school can be a really competitive place. I remember a very competitive colleague of mine kind of dismissing me as a younger student, saying, oh, yeah, well, you're obviously not very serious about becoming a professional musician. And of course, my knee-jerk reaction was to just be really offended and like, how dare you? You don't know me. But as I reflected on the content of that comment, I was thinking, well, of course I'm serious about becoming a professional musician. But then I wondered, am I making the most out of my time here? Am I doing everything I can to improve, to become more marketable, to take advantage of all the opportunities that my particular school had to offer. And I realized that I wasn't. I was kind of coasting and just waiting around hoping things would work out well for me. And I realized that I needed to really buckle down and start working and start interacting more with the other musicians and the professors in my university, and really grabbing a hold of any opportunity that might come my way. So I guess that rude comment from my colleague did end up giving me some benefits in the long run. And obviously it's not a competition, but just so you know, I did get a job in music quite a bit sooner than that person did in the end. So there you go.
Yeah, so take that. So as the title of this podcast hints at, what do you wish that someone would have told you to be more successful or at peace in your career? This is kind of going off of, you have the negative part, but what's something that you wish maybe somebody would have just kind of put their arm around your shoulder and just have that real talk with you? Maybe that person who you sat next to that gave you all the advice did, but what do you wish that you would have learned earlier that could have maybe helped you as you developed?
When we were in school, the focus was on helping us gain all the skills we needed to win the audition, to get us the job. And there was less of a focus on helping us build the skills we would need to keep that job and to continue growing and improving and feeling validated as musicians over the longevity of a person's career, which could be decades. So I wish someone had explained to me that the type of musician you are, the type of worker you are, when you're sitting in the seat, when you have the job already, it's a very different type of job from the preparation side of trying to get into the seat in the first place. The audition was this big dream that we were chasing, winning that audition. And then once you got there, there wasn't a lot of guidance. People said, oh, congratulations, now you're a professional, enjoy. And there wasn't a lot of discourse around how do you avoid injury? How do you handle interpersonal conflicts with your colleagues or your administration or your conductor? And those are the things that most musicians have to develop once they're in the chair. I also wish that I'd known that the experiences I had in life and the relationships I made outside of my practice room were the things that would become truly important in terms of my professional development. That you can't just shut yourself off from the rest of the world and be alone with your instrument and become a master of your craft and have that be enough for you. You have to be engaged with the world, engaged with people around you, and bringing those people into your life. That's what really makes our practice so fulfilling. And frankly, that's what's going to create a society that will continue to foster the importance of live music.
And that goes back to your sense of the importance of community.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you've experienced it, you make sure to remind other people. Don't forget to connect. Don't forget to volunteer or contribute, or heck, make eye contact with people. That is probably just, like you said, you want to put your head down and master your instrument and make that perfect sound over and over and over again. And so much of a person probably could get a little lost in that. So at your house, or maybe on a coffee cup or a shirt, what's a quote or saying that resonates with you over the years?
There's a quote from somatic educator Moshe Feldenkrais that I think about anytime I'm learning something new. His quote is about making the impossible possible, the possible easy, and the easy elegant. I feel like it's a beautifully succinct way to describe the trajectory of learning, and it's also a useful reminder of what humans can achieve through thoughtful and diligent application of their skills.
That crosses over from the symphony stage into athletics or anything creative, but just that's a good universal quote that could drive a lot of people in the right direction, because all they think is, if I can never be the best at anything, I don't even want to try. Well, break it out into smaller pieces. That's an interesting viewpoint. I've heard of Feldenkrais in the context of education also, right? He's somebody who kind of helps mold curriculum for people who just kind of see and think of the world in a different way.
Yeah, I really became interested in the work of Feldenkrais when I was looking into how I could improve the way that I was moving and the choices that I was making to kind of help myself get out of some of the physical habits I was in that were becoming problematic to my playing. Like, why was I using one side of myself more than the other side? Well, which way was I turning my head? Was the mouthpiece too far over to the left, so I was developing those muscles on the left a little more to the right? And if so, why was I doing that? Did I need to play that way? Could I move the horn this way or that way? Learning about Feldenkrais and his thoughts on movement and learning was really beneficial to my improvement as a musician and learning to use myself in a way that could really allow me to play my best.
I bet as you think about what you consumed, absorbed, watched, even maybe saw in person over the years, there are certain traits that the experts that you hold as role models do. I used to go play recreational basketball at 24-Hour Fitness. And, after a big shot, these dudes would do like these movements like LeBron James, or they'd stick their tongue out like Michael Jordan when they were just about ready to slam dunk. That didn't help them whatsoever, but they saw other people doing it and they were emulating. So I wonder maybe somewhere along the way, if your mouthpiece was over on one side of your mouth more than the other, was that because of person X that you, for lack of a better term, idolized as a youngster and saw them playing it this way? And maybe they played it that way because of what was comfortable for their teeth or their shoulder. Those little nuances that you bring forward from other people, I think it's interesting to consider. Maybe that's why some of those habits just get locked in because you want to be more like person X, even in the tiniest way.
Yeah. One of the things about playing an instrument that can be problematic is that it's just a very unnatural position for your body to be in. So our goal is, how can we assume an unnatural position yet also feel very relaxed and in balance? And often a musician isn't thinking about that. They're thinking, how can I make the most beautiful phrase? How can I have the most gorgeous sound? And then their body adapts to what they think will be the best position for that. But what makes a fine player, and I think it's similar to what makes a fine athlete, is someone who is comfortable in their body and then performing their tasks from a place of comfort and groundedness, which is something that I think we can all aspire to emulate.
Yeah, almost like we're kinetic sculptures and we're all very well balanced. And every once in a while we wobble, but we never quite topple over unless something big comes along and really gives us a shove.
Yeah, totally.
As you kind of consider yourself between now and the next, I'd say 3 to 5 years, what do you see yourself doing? Are you still performing? Are you going more into the teaching side? Are you an advocate or your mentor? What's the next phase, as at least you kind of have planned out for yourself?
Well, the symphony schedule is fairly similar year after year. So I'm going to continue playing with the orchestra and performing all the repertoire at my highest possible level. I'm looking forward to playing new repertoire. After 20 years in the chair, sometimes you get a lot of repeats. So it's really exciting when some new repertoire comes along and I get to test out different interpretations and how am I going to perform this and fit in with the rest of the group. So that's my orchestra goal. Outside of orchestra, I have a whole bunch of little pots going on the stove. I want to increase my horn studios at the 2 universities where I teach. I'd like to continue volunteering in the Winnipeg Horn Club and cultivating a community of horn players of all different ages and levels. I have a couple of chamber music groups that I really enjoy performing with during the summer, which is the off season of the symphony. I have some hiking trips planned. Yeah, I just want to keep mixing things up, making life interesting and performing well on and off the stage.
Well, that's so good, because then you feel like you've got this well-rounded, fulfilling life. You're not chasing this dream that's always just a butterfly's flutter away, but you've still done what you set out to do all those years before. And you're setting in habits and inspiration into new students. Speaking of students, you were saying earlier that you do educational pursuits. What's the average age of the people who you teach?
At the moment, I'm teaching at 2 different universities. So I'm teaching undergraduates. A lot of them are interested in becoming band teachers. Some of them are getting a Bachelor of Arts degree and double majoring in something else. And I try to take them where they're at and give them basic skill set so they can feel like they have mastered the horn for what they want to use it for in their career. But I also try to help them leave the door open so that if they should decide one day maybe they want to go back and get a performance degree, or maybe they want to start taking auditions, they've got a foundation where they can do that. So that's my major teaching endeavor. My involvement with the Winnipeg Horn Club is a little bit different. That's a full range of people. So students that are thinking about going into music, retired musicians, some older folks who picked up an instrument because now they finally got a little bit of free time in their later years. And in that group, it's more about fostering a sense of community and helping everyone feel confident in what each person brings to the table, and creating a group of people who can make music together at a level that maybe some of them never thought possible. So that's a really exciting community project that I am involved with.
Just like with Feldenkrais, making the impossible possible. And that gives them a sense of confidence and value if they can do something that they never even thought they could do. If you were just to sit down, get your horn, be in a room by yourself and just play a piece for fun, what's one of the fun pieces? What just makes you smile or gives you this swelling of happiness to be able to play?
Well, I really love doing orchestra karaoke, where we've been assigned one of my favorite pieces in the literature. So it's like a Brahms or Tchaikovsky or some big Mahler, big romantic piece. And I can sit in my living room with the speakers on as loud as possible because nobody else is home. And I have the Berlin Philharmonic as my backup band, and I'm wailing away on my one little part as a part of a big group. It's just great. And frankly, after that, I can go to work, and then I get to sit with all of my favorite people and close friends who are also amazing musicians and do the same thing again. It's really just a fantastic career. I love it so much.
That's so neat. So if somebody wanted to hear your work or connect with you as an inspiration, or just kind of maybe ask you a question or two, what's the best way to get a hold of you, follow you, find you?
Well, I help run the social media for our Musicians Association. We are the Musicians of the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra on Facebook and at Musicians of the WSO on Instagram. Okay. Otherwise, you can contact me through the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, Brandon University, or the University of North Dakota.
Sounds good. Well, I'll make sure to get those links and add them into the description so everybody can check it out. And you were mentioning earlier about marketing yourself, or how you market yourself as a musician. How do you do that? Are there websites that you put up a sizzle reel? Do you put ads in journals and forums? How do you market yourself, as you were talking about?
There's a couple of categories of instrumental musicians and a few different career paths that are possible. Generally, someone will go into one of three paths. One is part-time or full-time career as a military musician. The other is a part-time or full-time career as an orchestra musician, which is what I do. And the rest generally fall into a freelancer category. So a freelancer is going to market themselves in the same way as a freelancer in any other field, with your website and links to your YouTube channel and running a social media campaign. But generally, in the music world, if you're freelancing, you meet people and show up to gigs and play your best, and you're a good colleague, and hopefully that interpersonal networking on the job is what will extend your reach as a musician.
I'm sure as you get your archive of performances, almost like with session musicians, a guitarist or a bassist or a piano player will sit in and say, oh yeah, by the way, that song you heard on the radio, yeah, that's my work, that's my piano, and probably create a bit of a self-PR. Speaking of that, is there somebody maybe that would be hired as an agent in this world, or is that more for band style and singers and so on? Are there other agents for symphony musicians?
I think that is not very common among the classical world. It's small enough that we're able to network at a national or even international level through word of mouth. I do think that, for example, I'm in a woodwind quintet, and if we had the money, we would absolutely get a marketing person on board to help us build our website and scout around for different possibilities. But mostly that's unpaid work that the individual musician has to do eating into their free time. So you have to put a lot of personal investment.
Well, maybe through connections of this podcast, some enterprising young artist who wants to volunteer 10, 15, 20 hours of their time a month to help this woodwind group or whomever else along the way get the word out there. This is how we connect, right?
That's right.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for your time and really enlightening me on what it's like to be a symphony musician. I've always been curious and interested in the day of a person who's up on the stage in their suit and a shiny instrument and everybody claps, the curtain drops, and then what? So it's really neat to kind of hear the real life daily steps of a high-level professional symphony musician. So thanks again to Callie Siverson Oberheu for spending some time with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Troy.
Thank you again for taking time to enlighten us with your experience and sharing some inspiration. This has been Troy Vera from the WIWHK podcast. Join us again, and we appreciate your time.